I will tell you something that most people spend their entire lives misunderstanding. They believe that other people are the source of their suffering. They believe that a harsh comment, a rejection, a betrayal, or a lack of appreciation is what hurts them. But if you observe carefully, you will discover something profound. What hurts you is not what others say or do. What hurts you is the power you have unknowingly given them over your sense of self. From a young age, many of us are conditioned to seek approval. We learn to feel valuable when we are praised and feel worthless when we are criticized. We learn to measure ourselves through the eyes of others. If people like us, we feel confident. If they reject us, we feel broken. If they admire us, we feel important. If they ignore us, we feel invisible. And without realizing it, we hand over the keys to our inner peace. Think about how dangerous that is. The moment your self-worth depends on someone else's opinion, your emotional state is no longer yours. It belongs to whoever happens to be judging you that day. One compliment can lift you up, and one criticism can tear you down. You become like a leaf in the wind, constantly moved by forces outside your control. Now ask yourself, is that freedom? Many people spend their lives trying to gain value by proving themselves to others. They work harder, achieve more, look better, speak differently, and wear masks just to receive acceptance. Yet no matter how much approval they receive, it never feels like enough. Why? Because external validation is a bottomless pit. The more you depend on it, the more you need it. The truth is that no amount of praise can permanently heal a person who secretly doubts their own worth. And this is where your transformation begins. You must understand that your value is not something another person can give you, and therefore it is not something another person can take away. Your value is inherent. It exists before the compliments arrive. It exists after the criticism appears. It remains unchanged whether people applaud you or reject you. Imagine a mountain. The mountain does not become taller because someone praises it. It does not become smaller because someone insults it. It simply remains what it is. You must learn to become like that mountain. When someone criticizes you, listen calmly. If there is truth in their words, learn from it. If there is no truth in their words, let it pass. Why carry a burden that was never yours? Why allow another person's judgment to become your identity? Most emotional wounds are created when we confuse opinions with reality. Someone may call you a failure. That does not make you a failure. Someone may say you are not good enough. That does not make it true. Someone may reject you. That does not diminish your worth. These are merely perceptions passing through another person's mind. The suffering begins when you accept those perceptions as facts. The strongest individuals are not those who never face criticism. They are those who have stopped defining themselves through criticism. They know who they are. They know their principles. They know their values. And because they know themselves, the opinions of others no longer shake their foundation. This does not mean becoming arrogant. It does not mean ignoring feedback. It means developing an inner anchor so strong that your identity is no longer at the mercy of the world, because the world will always have opinions. Some people will admire you. Others will misunderstand you. Some will support you. Others will doubt you. If your self-worth rises and falls with every opinion, your life will become an endless emotional roller coaster. But when your worth comes from within, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing rejection. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into places where you do not belong. You begin to act from authenticity rather than insecurity. And in that moment, you discover a kind of freedom that many people never experience. you realize that nobody has the power to define who you are unless you hand them that power. The day you stop giving others control over your self-worth is the day you stop being emotionally controlled by them. After you stop giving other people control over your self-worth, another realization begins to emerge. You start to see that much of the pain you have carried throughout your life came from taking things personally. Someone criticizes you, and you assume there must be something wrong with you. Someone rejects you, and you conclude that you are not enough. Someone behaves coldly toward you, and you immediately search for reasons within yourself. But what if I told you that most of the time, people's actions reveal far more about them than they reveal about you? This understanding can completely change the way you experience life. Observe human behavior carefully. Every person you meet is carrying invisible burdens. They carry fears, insecurities, disappointments, expectations, wounds from childhood, and unresolved struggles that nobody else can fully see. These hidden experiences shape the way they think, speak, and act. Yet when someone treats us poorly, we often forget this. Imagine a person who constantly criticizes others. At first glance, it may seem as though they are pointing out flaws in everyone around them. But if you look deeper, you often discover someone who is deeply dissatisfied with themselves. Their criticism is not a reflection of your value. It is an expression of their inner state. A person who is at peace rarely feels the need to tear others down. A person who feels secure rarely feels threatened by the success of others. A person who truly respects themselves rarely seeks pleasure in humiliating someone else. The way people treat you often reveals the condition of their own mind. Think about a mirror covered in dirt. If you stand in front of it and see a distorted reflection, would you immediately conclude that there is something wrong with your face? Of course not. You would understand that the distortion comes from the mirror itself. Many people move through life carrying distorted mirrors. Their fears distort their perception. Their anger distorts their judgment. Their jealousy distorts their reactions. Their pain distorts their relationships. And when they project those distortions onto you, it is easy to believe that what you are seeing is an accurate reflection of yourself. But it is not. Consider rejection. Rejection is one of the experiences people fear most. Whether it comes from a relationship, a friendship, a workplace, or society itself, rejection can feel deeply painful. But rejection does not always mean you are inadequate. Sometimes it simply means you were not aligned with what another person wanted, needed, or understood. Not everyone is meant to appreciate you. Not everyone is capable of understanding you. Not everyone is ready for what you have to offer. And that is perfectly fine. The flower does not become less beautiful because one person walks past it without noticing. The sun does not stop shining because someone chooses to stay indoors. Your worth is not determined by another person's ability to recognize it. The same principle applies to betrayal. When someone betrays your trust, the immediate reaction is often to question yourself. You wonder whether you were foolish, weak, or somehow responsible for their actions. But betrayal is first and foremost a reflection of the betrayer's character. Their dishonesty belongs to them. Their lack of integrity belongs to them. Their choices belong to them. You may learn lessons from the experience, but you do not need to carry responsibility for actions that were never yours. This understanding does not mean becoming naive. It does not mean excusing harmful behavior. It does not mean allowing people to mistreat you without consequence. Rather, it means seeing clearly. When someone acts from anger, recognize the anger. When someone acts from insecurity, recognize the insecurity. When someone acts from jealousy, recognize the jealousy. Do not absorb these things into your identity. One of the greatest forms of freedom is learning to separate another person's behavior from your sense of self. The moment you stop internalizing every negative action directed toward you, you stop carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to begin with. This requires awareness and discipline. The mind naturally wants to personalize everything. It wants to create stories. It wants to interpret every glance, every comment, every rejection as evidence of something about you. But most of those stories are illusions. The mature mind learns to pause and ask a different question. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "What might this reveal about them?" Often, the answer changes everything. You begin to see people with greater clarity and greater compassion. You recognize that many hurtful actions come from suffering, confusion, fear, and inner conflict. And while this does not justify harmful behavior, it prevents you from becoming emotionally trapped by it. Because once you understand that people's actions are often reflections of their own inner world, you stop allowing their darkness to define your light. And that is the moment their power over you begins to disappear. Once you stop allowing others to define your worth, and once you understand that people's actions often reflect their own inner world more than they reflect you, a new challenge appears. You begin to realize that even when you understand these truths, you can still suffer if you do not learn to master your emotional responses. This is where many people struggle. They believe that emotional strength means never feeling anger, sadness, disappointment, or fear. They think strong people are somehow unaffected by life's difficulties. But that is not true. Strength is not the absence of emotion. Strength is the ability to remain conscious when emotion arises. Every human being experiences emotional reactions. Someone insults you and anger appears. Someone betrays your trust and pain appears. Someone rejects you and disappointment appears. These reactions are natural. They are part of being human. The problem is not the emotion itself. The problem begins when the emotion takes control of you. Think about how many regrets in life are created in a single moment of emotional reaction. A person says something hurtful, and immediately you respond with words you later wish you had never spoken. Someone provokes you, and you act impulsively. A difficult situation arises, and fear convinces you to make poor decisions. In each case, the external event was not the true source of the damage. The damage came from losing control of your response. Many people live as prisoners of their emotions because they have never learned to create space between what happens and how they react. Everything becomes automatic. Someone presses a button and they react instantly. Someone criticizes them and they become angry. Someone disagrees with them and they become defensive. Someone ignores them and they become insecure. Their emotions become like strings and the world becomes the puppeteer. But freedom begins the moment you recognize that there is always a space between stimulus and response. That space may be small at first. It may only last a few seconds. But within those few seconds lies enormous power. Imagine someone speaking to you disrespectfully. The old version of yourself reacts immediately. Anger rises, and words leave your mouth before wisdom has a chance to arrive. The situation escalates. More suffering is created. Now imagine a different response. The same words are spoken, the same emotion arises. But instead of reacting immediately, you pause, you observe the anger, you feel it, you acknowledge it. But you do not become it. And because you do not become it, you are free to choose your next action consciously. This is mastery. Most people believe that emotions control them. In reality, emotions are simply messages. They arrive, they communicate something, and then they pass. The trouble begins when we cling to them, identify with them, and allow them to dictate our behavior. Anger may tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear may tell you that uncertainty exists. Sadness may tell you that something meaningful has been lost. But emotions are advisors, not rulers. The moment you allow them to rule your life, clarity disappears. This is why awareness is so important. You must learn to observe your inner state without immediately obeying it. When anger appears, observe it. When fear appears, observe it. When jealousy appears, observe it. When insecurity appears, observe it. Notice how these emotions rise within you. Notice how they create urges, stories, and impulses. Then simply remain present. You will discover something remarkable. No emotion lasts forever. Every emotion is temporary. It arrives like a wave, rises to a peak, and eventually fades away. Yet many people spend years suffering because they react to temporary emotions with permanent decisions. A few moments of anger destroy relationships. A few moments of fear prevent opportunities. A few moments of insecurity lead to years of self-doubt. The emotion passes, but the consequences remain. The disciplined mind understands this and learns patience. Not every feeling requires action. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every emotional impulse should be followed. Sometimes the wisest response is simply to wait, to breathe, to observe, to allow the storm within you to settle before deciding what to do next. As your awareness grows, something beautiful begins to happen. Situations that once controlled you lose their grip. The comment that once ruined your entire day becomes a passing moment. The criticism that once consumed your thoughts becomes information you can calmly evaluate. The conflict that once triggered an emotional explosion becomes an opportunity to practice composure. People may still attempt to provoke you. Life will still present challenges. Unexpected difficulties will still appear, but your inner state is no longer determined by every external event. You begin to understand that true power is not found in controlling the world around you. True power is found in controlling what happens within you. Because when you master your emotional responses, you take back the one thing that nobody should ever control except you, your mind. As you begin to master your emotional responses, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. You start to notice that some of the suffering in your life does not come from strangers, critics, or unexpected hardships. It comes from repeatedly allowing certain behaviors, situations, and people to cross lines that should never have been crossed in the first place. This is where boundaries become essential. Many people hear the word boundary and immediately think of conflict. They imagine being rude, distant, or unkind. But true boundaries have nothing to do with hostility. A boundary is simply a clear expression of self-respect. It is the understanding that while you cannot control how others behave, you can decide what you are willing to accept in your life. Without boundaries, even the strongest person will eventually become exhausted. Imagine living in a house with no doors. Anyone can walk in at any time. Anyone can take what they want. Anyone can leave a mess behind. How long would it take before that house became chaotic? Yet many people live this way emotionally. They allow constant disrespect. They tolerate manipulation. They ignore repeated violations of trust. They sacrifice their peace to avoid disappointing others. And then they wonder why they feel drained, resentful, and hurt. The problem is not that people occasionally cross the line. The problem is that the line was never clearly established. One of the greatest misconceptions people have is believing that kindness requires self-sacrifice. They think being a good person means always saying yes. They believe they must always be available, always be accommodating, always be understanding, even when it comes at the expense of their own well-being. But there is an important difference between kindness and self-neglect. Kindness comes from strength. Self-neglect comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being disliked, fear of disappointing someone. Because of these fears, many people spend years betraying themselves to keep others comfortable. They remain in unhealthy relationships. They tolerate disrespectful behavior. They agree to things they do not want to do. They remain silent when they should speak. And every time they ignore their own needs, a small part of them loses trust in themselves. Eventually, resentment begins to grow. Not because others are taking advantage of them, but because deep down they know they are allowing it. The truth is that people often learn how to treat you by observing what you tolerate. If someone repeatedly disrespects you and experiences no consequences, they learn that the behavior is acceptable. If someone constantly violates your time, energy, or values, and you never address it, they learn that the behavior can continue. This is not about blaming yourself for the actions of others. People are always responsible for their own behavior, but you are responsible for protecting your own peace. And protection requires boundaries. A healthy boundary does not need anger. It does not need aggression. It does not need long explanations. It simply requires clarity. Sometimes a boundary sounds like no. Sometimes it sounds like I am not comfortable with that. Sometimes it sounds like if this behavior continues, I will remove myself from the situation. Simple, clear, respectful. Many people struggle with this because they want everyone to understand and approve of their boundaries. But that is not always possible. The people who benefit most from your lack of boundaries are often the people who resist them the most. When you begin protecting your time, some people may call you selfish. When you stop accepting disrespect, some people may accuse you of changing. When you refuse to be manipulated, some people may become uncomfortable. Do not be surprised by this. A person who is used to unlimited access may see healthy limits as rejection. But boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are communication. They tell the world how you expect to be treated. More importantly, they remind you of your own value. Every healthy boundary sends a message to yourself. My well-being matters. My peace matters. My time matters. And with every boundary you honor, your self-respect grows stronger. There is another important lesson here. Setting a boundary is only the first step. Enforcing it is where true transformation occurs. Many people communicate their limits, but never follow through when those limits are ignored. As a result, the boundary becomes meaningless. Words alone do not create boundaries. Docs do. When someone repeatedly violates a healthy limit, there must be a consequence. Sometimes that consequence is distance. Sometimes it is reduced access. Sometimes it is walking away completely. Not from hatred, not from revenge, but from wisdom. Because protecting your peace is not selfish. Protecting your peace is necessary. You cannot build a strong life while constantly allowing others to tear down the foundation. You cannot heal while remaining in environments that repeatedly wound you. You cannot become emotionally free while giving unrestricted access to people who consistently disrespect your spirit. The moment you stop feeling guilty for protecting your inner peace is the moment you stop volunteering for your own suffering. And that is when respect for yourself becomes stronger than your fear of losing others. After learning to protect your peace through healthy boundaries, there is one final chain that must be broken before true emotional freedom can emerge. It is a chain so common that most people do not even realize they are carrying it. It silently influences their decisions, shapes their behavior, and determines how they see themselves. That chain is the need for validation. If you look deeply, you will notice that much of human suffering comes from wanting something from others that they were never meant to provide. We want approval, we want recognition, we want acceptance, we want people to tell us that we are good enough, successful enough, attractive enough, intelligent enough, worthy enough. And because we want these things so badly, we begin shaping our lives around them. We say things not because they are true, but because they will be liked. We make choices not because they align with our values, but because they will be admired. We pursue goals not because they fulfill us, but because they will impress others. Slowly, without realizing it, we stop living our own lives and begin performing for an audience. The tragedy is that the audience is never satisfied. No matter how much approval you receive, there will always be someone who disagrees with you. No matter how successful you become, there will always be someone who is more successful. No matter how admired you are, there will always be someone who criticizes you. If your happiness depends on universal approval, happiness will remain forever out of reach. This is why the pursuit of validation becomes a prison. At first, it feels rewarding. A compliment arrives and you feel good. Recognition arrives and you feel important. Praise arrives and your confidence rises. But notice what happens next. You begin depending on it, and the moment you depend on it, you become vulnerable to its absence. Now, criticism hurts more. Rejection hurts more. Silence hurts more because your sense of worth has become attached to external responses. You begin checking whether people approve. You begin worrying about what others think. You begin questioning yourself whenever validation is missing. In other words, you surrender your inner stability to forces you cannot control. Think carefully about this. If 10 people praise you and one person criticizes you, what does the mind often focus on? The criticism. Not because it is more important, but because the mind that seeks validation is always searching for confirmation that it is acceptable. This creates endless anxiety. You become afraid of making mistakes, afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being judged. And fear is a terrible foundation upon which to build a life. The most liberated people are not those who receive the most approval. They are those who have become less dependent on it. They understand that praise and criticism are both temporary. Today, someone may admire you. Tomorrow, the same person may judge you. Human opinions change constantly. If you build your identity on them, your identity will constantly fluctuate. This is why you must learn to look inward. Ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, do they approve of me? Ask, am I acting in alignment with my values? Instead of asking, what will people think? Ask, what do I know to be right? Instead of asking, how can I gain acceptance? Ask, how can I remain authentic? These questions lead to freedom because authenticity requires courage. The moment you stop chasing validation, you will discover that not everyone likes the real you. Some people prefer the version of you that constantly sought their approval. Some people preferred the version of you that never disagreed. Some people preferred the version of you that sacrificed your needs to meet theirs. When you begin living authentically, those relationships may change, and that is perfectly natural. Your responsibility is not to become acceptable to everyone. Your responsibility is to remain truthful to yourself. This does not mean rejecting feedback or becoming indifferent to others. Healthy feedback can help us grow. Wise advice can help us improve. The difference is that growth comes from learning, while validation comes from dependency. One strengthens you, the other controls you. As you mature, you begin to appreciate compliments without needing them. You appreciate recognition without depending on it. You appreciate acceptance without chasing it. And when criticism comes, it no longer destroys your peace because your identity is rooted somewhere deeper. You know who you are, you know what you stand for, you know your values. That inner certainty becomes stronger than public opinion. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to be everything for everyone. You stop exhausting yourself trying to win approval from people who have already decided not to understand you. You stop carrying the impossible burden of managing other people's perceptions. Instead, you simply live. You speak honestly. You act intentionally. You remain aligned with your principles. And you allow others to think whatever they choose, because true freedom begins the moment you no longer need permission from the world to be yourself. And that is when no opinion becomes more powerful than your own understanding of who you are. As we come to the final part of this journey, everything we have discussed begins to come together. We have learned not to place our self-worth in the hands of others. We have learned that people's actions often reveal more about them than about us. We have learned to master our emotional responses, to establish healthy boundaries, and to free ourselves from the endless need for validation. But there is one final lesson that transforms all of these principles from knowledge into wisdom. You must learn how to turn pain into growth, because no matter how strong, aware, or disciplined you become, life will still challenge you. People will disappoint you, plans will fail, relationships will end, mistakes will happen, loss will arrive. Difficulties are not signs that something has gone wrong. Difficulties are part of life itself. The question is not whether pain will visit you. The question is what you will do when it arrives. Most people experience pain and immediately ask, why is this happening to me? They see themselves as victims of circumstance. They become trapped in resentment. They replay the event over and over in their minds. They focus on what was lost, what was unfair, and what should have been different. As a result, the pain remains alive long after the event has ended. The mind continues suffering because it refuses to let go of the story. But there is another way. A wiser question is this: what is this experience trying to teach me? That single question changes everything. When life becomes your teacher, even suffering becomes valuable. The betrayal teaches discernment. The failure teaches resilience. The rejection teaches self-reliance. The loss teaches appreciation. The hardship teaches strength. The challenge teaches patience. What once appeared to be an obstacle becomes a lesson. What once appeared to be punishment becomes preparation. This does not mean you must enjoy pain. It does not mean pretending that difficult experiences are pleasant. Pain hurts because it is pain. The goal is not to deny it. The goal is to use it. Think about every strong person you have ever admired. Their strength did not appear by accident. Their wisdom was not created through comfort. Their character was not developed during easy times. It was forged through challenges. It was shaped by adversity. It was refined through struggle. The very experiences they once wished to avoid became the experiences that helped them grow. This is one of life's greatest paradoxes. The moments that feel like they are breaking you often become the moments that build you, but only if you allow them to. Pain itself does not create wisdom, but privation creates wisdom. Many people suffer repeatedly because they never learn from their experiences. They continue making the same decisions, repeating the same patterns, trusting the same unhealthy situations, and reacting in the same destructive ways. Years pass, but little growth occurs. The experience happened, the lesson was ignored. Do not let this happen to you. Whenever life challenges you, pause and examine the situation honestly. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What did this reveal about me? What strengths did this require me to develop? What patterns need to change? These questions transform suffering into growth, and over time, you begin to notice something remarkable. Experiences that once devastated you become easier to navigate, not because life has become easier, because you have become stronger. The storm may still arrive, but you are no longer the same person who faced the previous storm. Every challenge leaves you wiser. Every setback leaves you more resilient. Every lesson adds another layer of inner strength. This is how emotional freedom is built, not by avoiding pain, but by extracting wisdom from it. Eventually, you stop seeing difficult experiences as enemies. You begin seeing them as teachers. Some lessons arrive gently, others arrive harshly, but all of them carry the potential for growth. And when you truly understand this, fear begins to lose its hold over you. You no longer fear failure because you know it can teach you. You no longer fear rejection because you know it can strengthen you. You no longer fear mistakes because you know they can guide you. You no longer fear difficulties because you know they can transform you. Life can still knock you down. Life can still surprise you. Life can still test you. But every experience now serves a purpose. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. Everything becomes material for growth. And this brings us to the deepest truth of all. The goal was never to create a life where nobody could hurt you. The goal was to become a person who grows from every experience so completely that hurt can no longer diminish who you are. Because when every wound becomes wisdom, every setback becomes strength, and every challenge becomes growth, no one can ever truly hurt you again. They can only contribute to the person you are becoming.